goosebumps. It's a historic day. And you might also wonder, why are you focusing on Palestinian children in prisons on such a day? Children in Gaza are still dying. There's a lot going on. Why do we focus on Palestinian children in prison? Why? Think about it for a minute. I think from our side in Save the Children, how you treat children says so much about the society. Children don't belong in prisons. Full stop. And then when we will hear today from our excellent panel that children in Israeli prison are subjected to starvation, to abuse, to inhumane treatment, that's why we focus on this issue of Palestinian children in prison. They don't belong in prison. And we will hear now from our good panel today. And we will, but just briefly, before 7th of October, there were calculations that there were around 500 to 700 children in prison, Palestinian prison, in Israeli prisons. Since 7th of October, the Palestinian statistics have recorded that there are maybe 460 children being detained just since 7th of October until February. But as we will hear also today, that number might be much higher. And we don't have access, so we don't hear directly from what's happening to these children. These are children that are really denied access to their families, to their lawyers, and to humanitarian international organizations. So how these children are doing, as we are sitting here speaking, is something we will also hear more from our panel. But in Save the Children, we are really keen to, whatever circumstances, we want to talk to children themselves. Like we heard Jamal's word in the beginning, his words. So directly hearing from them, we did a study with an in-depth interviews in last year, in 2023. And talking to those children in prison, we found that 42% of them had sustained injuries, gunshot wounds, or broken bones during arrest. Parents reporting that these children leave prisons, when they come out, they have bloody clothes, or they have injuries. 70% of those children had been denied adequate food. They suffered from hunger, so starvation. 58% were denied contact with their families. And we'll hear from Khaled and DCI about this. And detention had an enormous toll on children's mental health. 73% suffering insomnia experiences from recurrent nightmares. And we will hear from Ahmad Arozi, our expert on this later. So because of this situation, the denial of basic human rights, this is why we choose to focus on the situation on Palestinian children today. And I'm how should I say it? In Save the Children, we try to work on many levels on this issue. We work with partners, and through the partners, we try and provide these children with legal assistance, but also reintegration support, getting back into their society, family. We also work with partners to document the effect that detention has on them. And we work on advocacy, like we do today. And we advocate with governments, at different levels, international, but also in Norway and EU and through others. And the two main things we've been asking now lately is to have what we call a moratorium, stop detaining children in prison. And now the second issue is around access, that these children need to get access to a lawyer, to their families, because that's a critical issue. Now, without further ado, I will actually give the words to our panel, because you are here to hear from our eloquent panel. It's a historic day here in Norway, yes, but I'm glad that we are able to focus on this basic human rights violation, because whatever happens, also future state or past state, children need to be respected and according to the individual human rights. So this is a key issue for us. So I will now introduce the program a little bit. I think we had it up there. But we will now first hear from Jostein Kobbeltveit. He's the managing director of the Rafto Foundation, who is the co-organizer. And then afterwards, we will have the keynote speaker. I'm really glad that Khaled Quzmar is here, the managing director for Defense for Children International. And DCIP, it's an independent local Palestinian child rights organization, having worked since 1991. You're even before the Oslo Agreement, Khaled. You've been working to document grave human rights violations. And then we will have a panel consisting of Amanda Rossi and Geir Andesland, and Jostein will facilitate that panel. So here's the program. We will hopefully also have time for some questions and Q&A session. I'm really glad also to see that there's so many people online. I should have said that in the beginning, maybe, that we are recording this session. It's being live streamed, but we will also record it so that people afterwards can hear it. Yeah, I think that's it. Then, Jostein, I'm really glad to give the word to you. Please.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Save the Children. Thank you to all for being here on what also Nora said is quite a historic day here in Norway, with the government recognizing the state of Palestine. Rafto Foundation, we are a human rights organization that support human rights defenders around the world. And we work with women human rights defenders, we work with human rights defenders challenging businesses. But for 37 years, we have awarded the Rafto Prize to human rights defenders at the front line. At the front line in terms of facing risk because of their work, on the front line for pushing human rights issues that are not getting enough attention or are emerging as human rights issues, or just trying to shed light on issues that really doesn't get the world's attention. And an important part of the Rafto Prize is that we work with the laureates, those who receive the prize afterwards. Last year, the Rafto Prize was awarded to Defense for Children International-Palestine. It was announced in September last year. And just to take us back there, it was at that time, the thinking was that, first of all, Palestine had really fallen off sort of the international attention at the time. So one of the aims was to shed light on Palestine at that time, but also doing it through a child rights lens, a human rights lens and a child rights lens. And Defense for Children International has been doing amazing work for over 30 years to promote and protect and advocate for the rights of children, and challenging both Palestinian authorities and the Israeli occupier on that. And one of the things that the award statement also made clear at the time was that Palestinian children live under apartheid. The system with military detention, with using military courts against children, using administrative detention, using violence and torture against children in detention, but also the indiscriminate killing of children also in the streets, how they are treated in their homes, how they are persecuted, how families are persecuted, and how that is done in a systematic way also can be considered that children in Palestine live under apartheid. And that was an important part of the award statement. And then also it was important for the Rafto Prize Committee to challenge the labeling as terrorists and designation of terrorists that both DCIP and other well-renowned human rights organizations in Palestine experienced in 2021. This is a method that we at the Rafto Foundation see many places. Many authoritarian governments are these days, as many of you know, labeling peaceful civil society activists as terrorists. And this trend, and that we saw in Palestine by Israeli authorities, was something that we wanted to explicitly challenge. Now, since some weeks after we announced the Rafto Prize, the war broke out. We've seen the devastation in Gaza, and that also made that for our laureate, Khaled Quzmar, could not join us in Bergen for the award last year. And that's also why we're very glad to have him with us now in Oslo and Norway this week. But it was but I think that even if also things have changed a lot, what we really see is that the war in Gaza has become a war on children, on civilians, and the need and the importance of taking a child rights lens to what is happening has only become even more important. And with all the devastation in Gaza happening, we also see that the situation in the West Bank is getting worse. Many of the issues that the Rafto Prize focused on in September is only getting worse in the West Bank. And we know that there was a generation of children in Gaza and in the West Bank that will have traumas for years to come after what has been happening now. We are gathering here at the week where there are at least some signs of attempts to hold perpetrators accountable with the ICC decision earlier this week. We are gathering here as Norway is recognizing the state of Palestine. But we really want to use this opportunity today, as Nora said, to focus on the situation for children in Palestinian prisons, and this continuously injustice that has been going on for decades, and that goes on and is increasing. And we are very glad to have with us both an excellent panel. I'll introduce the rest of the panel later on, but our keynote address will be from our Rafto laureate and also partner of Save the Children, Khaled Quzmar from Defense for Children International. He has been not only he's been leading the organization for many years, but he's also a lawyer himself. He knows firsthand from these military courts what happens to children in the courts, in detention. And we are very much looking forward to hear from you, Khaled. Welcome to Norway, welcome to Save the Children, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me today. And I would like to start by thanking Rafto Foundation for giving me this opportunity to be with you today. Just to talk a few words about the Rafto Prize. For me, as Justin said, yes, I informed about the winning of the Rafto Prize in September. For me, it was a surprise, and usually I had like negative surprise, but this time it was really surprise, positive, and even shocked when I hear that we've been selected from Western foundation I never heard about before. While unfortunately we live under what we called it as hypocrisy and double standards. I saw the attention of the Western state, about the situation in other places. But when it comes to Palestine, because of the sensitivity from Israel, they used to avoid touching us. And we also, through our work, we discovered that after we designated in 2020-21, many of our partners, they start even to avoid working with us directly because we are designated and labeled as a terrorist. So in that time, in the middle of this situation, we have been awarded by Rafto Foundation. So, and I start to search who is Rafto, what they are doing, where they are. But to be honest with you, until now, I'm learning more and more about the work that Rafto did all over the world. Just a few weeks ago, we've been in a meeting in Geneva for the laureates. I learned a lot about different conflict areas. Some of them I don't know about, but yeah, I learned a lot. Thank you, Rafto, for giving me also this opportunity. And back to also to Save the Children. My organization established in 1991 as a lawyer with assistant to represent children in the Israeli military court. The idea behind establishing this foundation was Palestinian prisoners, adults, they used to be in prison in the first Intifada in 1988, 87, and they saw, they witnessed the torture and the ill treatment that the children are subject to by the Israeli soldiers without taking in advance their privacy and their childhood. So they decided to establish a foundation to take care of the children. They contacted DCI, Defense for Children International in Geneva, and they agreed without even having a state in Palestine. They recognized the Palestinian Foundation as a member of the international movement to represent the children in Palestine. Myself, I joined the movement in 1993 as a volunteer. I worked for a few years because I used to work as a defense lawyer for prisoners, adult children. So I start to communicate with them because they have only one lawyer in Jerusalem, while I used to live in the north. So it's difficult to the lawyer to come to. There were about 5 military courts. They need staff to do that work. So I continue to work with them on voluntary basis until 1995. They asked me to join as a staff. So since that time, I continue only to focus on the children cases. And later on, we expand the work since we see that the children are arrested, subject to torture, and the way how they arrested the children. Until now, there is no change because it is a policy that tens of soldiers waiting until the middle of the night or the early morning, attacked the house, raided the house, without even waiting for the family to open the doors in order to get inside the room, asking for the target child, and get in the room without family member, and to wake up the child with the M16, the machine gun, and start to ask the child many questions directly to shock him without waiting for the answers, and then took the child from his bed. And I'm talking for these details about because I'm not a psychologist to analyze or to describe the impact on the child. My colleague Ruzi Ahmad will talk about that. So direct in front of the family. If the family is try to shake hand with the child, to kiss the child, to hug the child, they will be subject to be attacked. And here it's a message by attacking the family in front of the child and attacking the child in front of the family without allowing them to defend him. So I can guess that it is a kind of breaking the protection system for the child, because the child always he is protected by the family. And always this, I used to hear this question from my son, my children, that how the family agreed that to let the child be arrested and without defending the child. So this is unfortunately the situation that we start to live in. And after that, direct to put the child in the military jeep while he's blindfolded and handcuffed, and put the child in between the two seats where the soldiers are sitting, and the child all the time during the way to the interrogation center, subject to be slapped, kicked by the soldiers, humiliated, and sometimes taking pictures for the child, sending videos that they've been heroes and they are humiliating a child. So, and to the interrogation center without a family member, without a lawyer, without any legal advice, interrogated the child. So mostly more than 90% of the children who've been arrested in such circumstances, they gave the confession that they are asked for. And as a lawyer, it's very easy to discover that the child gave a confession because he is of control of himself, because he been subject to torture and ill treatment. Like a child gave a confession sometimes that he throws stones against the Israeli jeep for last 2 months, 200 times. And the interrogator is not care about the fact or the reality. He's only care about how to obtain any kind of confession. And then to sign, to write the confession in a Hebrew language and force the child to sign it. I remember one of the cases, the child was smart enough to, instead of signing, he write in Arabic that I am signing under pressure. So I took it as a case to defend him in the court, and I tried to embarrass the judge and the interrogator. I asked him to come, and I start to investigate how you interrogated him. He said I asked him in Arabic, and he answered in Arabic, and I wrote it in Hebrew. I translated to him, and he, how much your Arabic language is strong, is professional. Okay, I asked him to read what is written in the testimony. He said, yeah, his name, Muhammad something. I said, no, read it well, because your Arabic is strong enough and you can read it. He said, no, his name. So then I asked what called the translator in the court to read it to the judge. He read it that I am signing under pressure. Even that, the court accepted the testimony of the judge, the police, and he was convicted for throwing stones. So I asked the judge, how you believe that? Even yourself, if I ask you how many times you came to the court last 2 months, can you give me the exact number? He said, yeah, 5 days a week, 4 weeks every month. This calculation maybe cannot work, because maybe there were holidays, there were off days, being sick. So the system, to conclude in this issue, designed, the Israeli military court system designed to punish the Palestinian children and adults, and to legitimize the Israeli practices and the crimes against the Palestinian. So this conclusion is not only my conclusion, it's also the Israeli human rights lawyer. Her name, she passed away 2-3 years ago, Felicia Langer. She wrote a book, about her experience there. And she concluded by saying that after 24 years of working in this disgusting system, I decided to boycott this system, because basically there is no rights for the Palestinian. Exactly, there is no rights for the Palestinian. Myself, when I worked after more than 20 years there, I decided I become very much affected psychologically. I become, in the early morning when I go to the court, feel that I'm going to the cemetery with hopeless, suffer, because every day, about 10 hours working in the court and dealing with children, those who are denied all their rights, subject to all kinds of torture, ill treatment, and back to see my children that they are enjoying the life, going to a restaurant, going out, while the others are behind. So I become in a very confusing situation. So I decided to stop there. I did my master's degree in Ireland, and when I am back, I decide not to go back to the court as a lawyer because I'm not able even to support the cases that I work with. So we also, in my organization, we added another kind of work to the children, the psychosocial support, because in our culture as a Palestinian, we used to deal with anyone being arrested by the Israeli is a hero, is a struggler. He is in no need for any kind of support while they are children. So we start to give such services. The children at the beginning, they refuse to cooperate, and even the families, because they are not sick, they are heroes. But we discovered through the work that many children, they have a lot of things to talk about, but they kept inside, and then it will be affected negatively for them. So we managed to discover many cases that have been recruited by the Israeli as collaborators, or maybe subject to sexual abuse or something like this. And it happened a lot, some cases like this. And now, until now, the system is work. It's become a national system. And of course, we started this work by in partnership with Save the Children. So Save the Children jumped in the work since 1997 until now. So big thanks to Save the Children as a strategic partner to DCI, and the relation is not only with the office in Jerusalem, in Ramallah, but also we have a good relation with the Save the Children in Sweden and with Norway. So also we discovered that keep working. I start to work with 100 cases every year, and then the number become increase. So nothing changed. So we decided also to focus, to do the work of the lawyer will be two parts. One of them to give legal consultation and representation in the court, monitor the situation, but also to document all the violation that the child passed through from the beginning of arrest until the lawyer visit. So we discovered that, ongoing crimes committed against the children. And in order to attack the system, you have to know how is the system functioning. And then we become very much active in the issue of the advocacy. And here is why they designated us, because Israel used to consider themselves and to present themselves as the only democratic state in the Middle East, while we are present something else, which is the fact that Israel is an apartheid state, ongoing and continuously and widespread committed war crimes and crimes against humanity against the children. And we become very much well heard from the international community. We become the main resource for the child rights situation in Palestine, for the UN agencies, for the international organizations. So they tried to challenge us for years and years. They failed. They attacked us in different means. By the Israeli government, by right-wing groups called NGO Monetary Killers for Israel. They tried to silence us. They failed. Then they took, I call it as a military action against DCI by raided the office in 29 of July. 29 of July, July. So they raided the office. They confiscate some equipment, files, and computers, and some documents without notifying us. So in the second, after 2 hours, I file a complaint against the army in the Israeli military court itself. I know there is no justice there, but I try also to put them in this situation. So I asked the lawyer to write, instead of Israeli army, that thieves with Israeli army uniform, they raided the office and they steal the equipments. So the judge was laughing. Why you are using saying thieves, because army will never behave like in this way. If they did that, they have at least to leave a document that they are the Israeli army who did. Only I have the camera, filmed, recorded the raid. So after 2 days, they declared that yes, indeed, the Israeli army raided the office because we received a secret information that there is materials inside the office used in a military operation, or maybe will used. Just keep it open. So for us, we know what is behind that, our work, but what in exactly the work that caused this point, this action, it was mentioned recently after the war in Gaza by Josh Ball, the staff of the State Department who is dealing with the case in Palestine. He declared that, yes, DCI Palestine designated because of the case that I raised. My colleague in the US shared with him a case of a child in the 13 years old being arrested and subject to be raped by one of the interrogators. So we gave them the information. He shared it with the US Embassy in Jerusalem, and they investigate the case. So Israel, instead of taking an action against the perpetrators, they raided the office. So now the story is now it is not anymore work. Everyone knows that, yes, they designated us because of the work that we are doing. So back to the prisoners issue. Yes, just to conclude by a few words about the prisoners. In the past, I used, while working with the children in detention, of course, they are subject to torture, ill treatment, but at least they are still alive. They will be back. But I'm very much care about those who are killed. They will never be back. So the focus was there. Now, after the situation in Gaza and after the 7th of October, the situation of the prisoners became very, very much high risk. The way that they arrested the children, no way, from the moment of arrest until to be released, not the sentence, even after release, they've been subject to torture, ill treatment. If you see the pictures after, before and after, it's huge different. One thing. The second issue is the number of the arrest. Now we used to talk about every year 500 to 700. The number is doubled, even more. The last point is the administrative detention. We used to deal with every year about 1 case, 2 cases of children under administrative detention. Now more than half of the prisoners, the children in prison, are subject to administrative detention, arresting without a charge, without knowing why, without knowing when he will be. So all these cases, we shared it with what called the UN Working Group for Arbitrary Detention. We shared with them the evidence, and they concluded for all these cases that it is arbitrary detention. So it's ongoing crimes against children, and Israel is the only state in the world who arrested and prosecuted children in Israeli military court. It is the democratic state, the only democratic state in the Middle East. I will stop here, but I'm ready to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khaled. You can just stay up here because we're going to get these chairs up here, and we'll have our panel. So yeah, you have really given us the background here, and now we also we'll also have a few more experts joining us. We have Emmanuel Rossi, who is assistant professor at Oslo Metropolitan University and has been working a lot on trauma and children. And we have Geir Andersland, who is a lawyer who has long experience in working on children's rights. He's chairing the Committee on children's rights in the International Commission of Jurists in Norway, and is also part of this group called PIM, Palestinian Children in Israeli military courts or military detention. I've asked them to say a few words in the beginning, also just about their take on this, and Geir, maybe you can say, when you're listening to Khaled and what you hear here, and comparing to the work you've done.
Okay, I need even a person from Bergen need a microphone. Oh. Is it working? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to you, Khaled, and it's an honor to be asked to attend this panel, even if we have a very short time. But I know Jostein introduced me, but to be very, very brief, I think I have been a politician and a lawyer in about 50 years. And for the last 20 years, I have been very occupied with children's rights. And for the last 10 years, also Palestinian children's rights as part of PIM. And in recent times, also as a chair of the Children Committee in the organization International Commission of Jurists, the Norwegian branch. I just wanted to say very, very few words as sort of key points from my point of view, because my observation in this field is the enormous gap between the knowledge of realities of what's happening to the Palestinian children in prison, talking about ill treatment, talking about torture, talking about break on rule of law, all that which we know, and it has been documented very, very well from organizations as Save the Children, DCIP, but UNICEF, but also United Nations' own committee on the children's rights, which back in 2013, the same years as the first UNICEF report, there also was a committee report, because this committee is reporting on all the countries part of United Nations and which has ratified the Convention on the Right of the Child, which also Israel have done. And it's very interesting that this committee report is so very, but they express their deepest concern about what's happening to the Palestinian children in Israeli military prison in 2013. And so this gap between knowledge, which, I mean, no government in the world, no country and United Nations can have an excuse of not knowing this knowledge. And the gap between the knowledge and the sort of defensive, I would even say laid back reactions from governments regarding just this topic is very, very strange. I never understood it, because I think that regardless of what you think about Palestine and Israel, and just be clear, I know what I think, but regardless of that conflict, it should be possible to criticize Israel for breaking the elementary rules of how you treat children. And it's no doubt that Israel has to respect the Convention on the Rights of the Child also towards Palestinian children. I mean, it's no legal controversial to say that, even if Israel sometimes have tried to say that universal rights doesn't apply in the occupied territory. But that's nonsense. Of course, that's nonsense. And being a power of occupation, Israel has the obligation to respect the people in Palestine, and also to respect the children's rights, which is in the convention. So that's a gap. I think it's one of my most strongest experience through this work, and we might see a light in the dark now in these days, because I think the only thing we can do is to go on, to keep on with documented information, documented knowledge, and then we have to put more pressure on our governments, which even, I mean, it's very good to hope that, I mean, that the international courts now are reacting, but that's on a broader scale. I mean, regardless of what will happening with the genocide trial, what will happening with the arrest warrants of the criminals as Netanyahu, regardless of these things, I think we should go on with telling that the way Israel treat children is absolutely not acceptable, and it has to be reacted regardless the rest of the case. And that's my final words now in the beginning, because it has been said from other people today that also Nora in her invitation remark that it's a sort of it might be sort of paradox, or it's sort of shadowing that we are talking about this topic when all the other things happening. I mean, the catastrophe in Gaza is the worst of all. But even if that's going on, and of course the most important is to stop it, but given that situation, regardless of that situation, we must go on with getting Israel to respect and require of Israel to respect the Convention on the Rights of the Child, also for Palestinian children. Thank you.
And Ahmad, also just to add that you are also from Gaza. This what's happening there now. It's very, very close to you, and I think that we all of us feel with you in that situation. But at your work here at the Oslo Metropolitan University, and your research, you've done a lot of work on children and trauma, and what these kind of experiences does to children. Would you how would you say something about what does this treatment in prisons? What do we know about? What does it do with children at that stage of their development?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here today. It does a lot, of course. I've been working with traumatized children in Gaza Strip since the beginning of the second Intifada, and that is back to 2000. And actually, I have changed all my career as an occupational therapist. I stopped that, and I start working only publicly with the children. I used to work with children with cerebral palsy in the mat on the ground, but I have stopped that totally in 2000. October 2000, when the Intifada started, and I started to see the amount of suffer that children are actually dealing with. And since then, I've been only working with the traumatized children. But actually, I do the same here also in Norway, though trauma has another reasons here in Norway, like violence in the family, sexual abuse, and other things. But still, it has the same effect, actually, when it comes to children. This is another thing. But one of the major things that we need to highlight here today is the limbo. I'll go back to the idea or the title of this seminar. The first limbo is being a child versus an adult, because a prison is always for adults, not for a child. And this is the main and the major limbo that our children actually are facing. The second limbo actually you took earlier today is related to the role. We know that prisons is always for criminals, for thieves, for killers. But in this case, actually, prison is for children who's been throwing a stone. But from a cultural perspective, they are actually like heroes. So are they criminals or are they heroes in that context? The third important dimension I would like to raise here is the idea of knowledge and publicity. Most of my colleagues at work or friends here in Norway were very surprised, actually, after the agreement between Israel and Hamas of exchanging some of the prisoners recently, not recently, that was in December, that there were Palestinian children were in the Israeli prisons. They were totally surprised. They didn't know that 500 to 600, 700 child were being imprisoned over years in the Israeli prison. And we, in Norway, in this context, we don't know actually about that. We know about the 250 hostages that have been taken into Gaza, without any knowledge that thousands of children who's been taken systematically by a state, not by a group, into Israeli prison, and they being treated in extremely dehumiliating manners that you have been describing. The footage of the Israeli dragging children into the Israeli jeeps and inside Israel recently in Gaza is just disgusting. I cannot imagine what these children has been going through, actually. But from an academic and from practice perspective, I would like to talk about the long-term effects, the traumatic effects, and that's what actually I've been basically asked about to talk about today. The first and the most important effect that these children will suffer from for the rest of their lives is actually their functioning, generally speaking. That means that the children who are in schools will not be able to function as a school-born or a child in a school anymore, because they will be suffering from extreme pressure that's related to their concentration and their attention span. First of all, they will not be able to sit still in a classroom and hear about mathematics and society and religion while they are actually having a lot of concentration. So what we have experienced that these children who used to get an A character, they will decreased immediately to D or C or something like this. This is the first thing. But actually it will affect their ability and functioning to be also in a working place in the future. So it's actually what is happening is actually a kind of a systemic destruction of their existence for lifelong. And that also might affect actually their parenting ability. That means a destruction also for them to be a good parents. I cannot forget those who has been released from Israel after Palestinian prisoners who were adults, who've been released from Israeli prisons after Oslo agreement. Some of them ended up working in the security. And you know what? While they were interrogating one or few of Hamas activists that time who were against Oslo, they start to shout in Hebrew. They've been carrying the same trauma that is happening to them in the Israeli prison, where they were adults, they were carrying these experiences back to their context and to their people many years after. So they don't get rid of it, actually. It will be living with them. And for a child and a child role who should dream to be a pilot or an engineer or a teacher or whatever, you ask these children, what do you like to be? And I did. And they answered me simply, I want to die. Can you imagine a child who is starting his life, instead of dreaming about something beautiful and prideful, they are actually want to die. And why? And that's because they are not able actually to understand and to live with all this suffering that is happening with them, surrounding them there at night, while actually some other of the context will might like celebrate them as a heroes. You've been into the Israeli prison, you are a great boy, and so on, so on. But they are not. They are children, actually. The third psychological effect, it is related actually to the social challenges. Social challenges that means that most of the children will avoid contact with the context around them. And that's because also their heads is extremely busy with the experiences, inhumane experiences that they have gone through. So that means if I've been into prison, you are my best friend, you try to invite me for a coffee or a talk or an activity, I will immediately say no and no and no to you and you and you and you. And then I will prefer to sit and be grilled alone at home. The fifth thing is related to the regulation of emotions. Regulation of emotions related that we experience a lot of anger attacks, aggression attacks, withdrawal attacks that it is related to these children. Yes, I will stop here and.
Thank you. You really, I think, shown what some of the impact is and how does it work. How just to sort of jump to also from when we are sitting here and we Norwegian citizens, we are Save the Children, Rafto Foundation, others, Norwegian government. What can we do to end this practice? Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting because we have different angles, of course, and I mean, it's very important to get documented the very serious effects on the children experience this ill treatment. And then the question is how to stop it. What can we do? And then my political angle comes into the light because I think I talk about the gap between knowledge and what they are doing, but still I think it's a challenge to get the international society to react against Israel. I mean, to require in United Nations, in United Nations Committee of Children's Rights and United Council of Human Rights, to require of Israel some key points. For instance, first and foremost, just respect CRC as the Convention of the Rights of the Child. Just respect it and practice it. Why shouldn't Israel? I mean, what excuse can Israel have to not respect it? They have to answer on that. But if Israel shall answer, some strong powers has to put forward a question. And so far they are so laid back. But I say maybe something happening these days. But I think that's putting pressure on Israel. Then I would say, I hope we could get a new report from the United Nations Committee. They are reporting, for instance, Norway shall give a report this summer. And the committee of the Children's Rights are doing reports on every country. We had this report from 2013. We knew a new report telling what's going on in the occupied territory of Palestine. And then we need, for instance, Jostein and Save the Children here, Raftostiftelsen, know about our. We made a try to the Norwegian government or the Norwegian foreign minister because we have this. We have not much time, but we have this very interesting thing called administrative detention. I mean, we have the ill treatment of all Palestinian children in prison in general, and that we have the special type of administrative detention, which is absolutely without knowing what's happening. I mean, it's absolutely break on rule of law. And Norway, for instance, the General Secretary of the United Nations has said that Israel must totally stop using administrative detention against children. And the Norwegian government has asked Israel to minimize the use of it. I mean, that's absurd. I mean, even you say that you go on with this thing or you stop it, but you don't minimize it. And that's an example of where we have to go more and more on and ask our own governments, our own countries to react. It's not only Israel who is breaking the law, but we are also complacent in a way. If you don't ask them more stronger, then they have to stop.
Khaled, what can we do? And also just if we will have a few questions also, so if you can think about that.
Thank you very much. It's really a very important question. I will be in short, like many times I ask this question, and for me, it's in theory, yeah, the international law is so clear. Israel is committing war crimes, crime against humanity. So if there is a will to prosecute them or to act against Israel, instead of asking them, please minimize the arrest, please stop torturing children, or it's, I think Israel should be treated as any state in the world, but the problem is no political will. This is why back to the double standard, because the international law is work in some countries, but in Palestine still. So it took from us tens of years talking about Israeli apartheid against the Palestinian. Now I'm happy that everywhere now they are talking about Israel as apartheid after the reports from B'Tselem, from Amnesty International, from Human Rights Watch. But as a Palestinian, we used to raise this issue and the facts since years. Now, the issue of the prisoners. Now there is some progress in this issue, but still there is no political will to put Israel in, to put limit to these crimes. So the problem is no political will until now. I hope that will to take the decision before having more and more and more victims from the children, because for us in Palestine, children are almost around 47% of the community. In Gaza, around 50%. So how many victims we have to lose before taking the decision, at least to ensure their fundamental rights? Thank you.
Questions? Yep, over there.
Just as a notion. Hi, Mazen here. Just as a quick notion that I'd like to investigate. What do you have to say to those that still see open communication and discussion with the Israeli system as a means to end these practices that you're talking about? And concretely speaking, what other avenues are there? When you talk about political pressure, what does that look like? Just so that people have concrete versions to look for.
Let's gather some questions, because there's another one.
Hi, thank you for the presenters. Samar, working for Save the Children as Safe School Advisor, Palestinian, obviously. So very good remarks. I wanted just to talk a little bit about a very important concept by a professor called Shalhoub. She works for the Hebrew University, and she talked about the systematic principle of unchilding for the Palestinian children. And I think it have happened during the years. And when we talk about the unchilding, it refers to an authorized eviction of children from childhood for political goals and maintained by a violent, racist, sexist, classist, also machinery that exists everywhere and always. We have a very extreme case in here when we talk about children in detention centers, when we talk about the administrative process that Israel have been taken, but it's also in every single way of life of how we are designed as a Palestinian children, how your family, for example, cannot protect you, as you talked about, how they come in the middle of the night, you know, it's all come and designed for a very specific reason to ruin your psyche as a person. But also, I think it's very systematic, because I think it's all about how you structure the new generation in a way, how you eliminate that generation to have any kind of hope, any kind of able to be effective or important people inside their society. And how can you do that? You need to take them out from make them feel unworthy of the child rights, for example. You need to be very violent for them. We saw them also, like during COVID time, for example, the children were not given any information about the COVID in the detention centers. They have been enforced into so many different ways of violence. So just to remark that of the unchilding principle, I think that Israel have used systematically.
Maybe let's take one more. There's one more question here.
Okay, one last question.
Yes, it's Berit Åker from Defend International Law. Each year, our UN General Secretary launched his report on children in armed conflict. And as we know, Israel is not listed. What do you expect for this annual report? And if Israel is not listed, what will you do then? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So Justin, we have room for 10 more minutes. So I think if you can, we have now questions about the, is it possible to have any kind of dialogue with Israel about this? That's one question. Then the question about unchilding and then we have the children non-conflict question. So if you can include that in your, and then make that into your closing remarks, that would be perfect.
Okay, trying to answer as short as possible. Regarding open dialogue with Israel, of course that would have been the best thing, of course. But to be humble, I have tried a bit. I've written an article last summer in the Bergen newspaper, Bergens Tidende, called "What is it with Israel?" in English. What is it with Israel? Describing what's going on with the Palestinian children in prison, as we have heard about, all the ill treatment. And then postulating from my side that I think that Israel is the only country in the world which can do such a thing against children without condemnation. And I got the Bergen newspaper insisted on that my critical article couldn't be published without an answer from the Israeli embassy at the same time in the same newspaper. So I have to wait for several weeks before they bothered, my words, they bothered to answer. And then I got an answer from the Israeli embassy, which just was, they just rejected everything. They didn't even try to a dialogue. They were just talking about all the negative or demonizing of Israel. So, I mean, that's very difficult to have a dialogue. But of course, that would have been the best. And then to the other questions, because that's about what to do politically. And I think I'm a lawyer and have been an elected politician. I try to be much lawyer, but this is a political side, of course. But I still think that the only solution, if to keep a world not totally in conflict, we must believe in international law in a way and try to practice international law. And why shouldn't Israel practice it? Why shouldn't Israel practice it? And that's why I didn't know that I had hoped that the General Secretary in his yearly report on children in armed conflict, the COC report, should list Israel. And you told me he still wouldn't list. Well, that tells us how difficult this is, because the COC report is one example of a tool which you could use as reaction against Israel. I mean, in a friendly but still very in a way which is no doubt that you mean it. So I think, but we have to go on. We have to require in the Council, United Council of Human Rights, in the COC reports, in the United Committee reports on children's rights. All these tools are places where we can address Israel's ill treatment and ask them to respect the rights.
Ahmad, and then
I will disagree a little bit. I don't think we need more reports. I mean, we have seen over 230 days direct sending or live pictures of a genocide of children being. I don't think that we need. There is a lot of reports, and I don't think we need more. I mean, what we need is in actions to stop this genocide and stop Israel from conducting terrorist, fascist action against civilians people and especially children. And as an answer to your question, those who are actually talking about we need to have a dialogue with both parties and my advice is to ask them back, can you tell me a little bit what you have done through your dialogue to stop this? Would you accept that somebody arrest your child and torture him and you still have a dialogue, or shall you take him to prison? This is my direct answer to these people, because this is the political language that has been actually used over and over. What I think what's important and initially important is to spread more information about these crimes that is conducted actually again and again and again, and actually spread information and take Israel to court in every corner of the world. Actually, what I'm very glad to the university students that are actually the only hope of changing the history and the future also at the same time, because they are the seeds of change. And they are, I hope that these leaders, the future leaders, will do something about it, much more than we do. But actually, again and again, it's what is needed is actions to stop these things. And think about our children, our grandchildren, and some years later will ask us what you have done to stop this. We need to have also an answer for them.
From Geir and then Khaled. Yeah.
Very short, and just to add a remark to my earlier answer. I still believe in legal action, the legal tools. But of course, if that doesn't work, if it doesn't function, then you have the question of sanctions, of course. Kind of sanctions against Israel, boycotting Israel, all that kind of things. That's the next step, of course, as you do against Russia. But still, I hope that it's possible to confront Israel on an international law basis.
Khaled.
Thank you very much. I believe that your question is a very important question, because in theory, yes, dialogue should be everywhere. But back to UNICEF report in 2013. So they spent more than 2 years dialogue with the Israeli, open dialogue, and they've been in touch with us to share our main concern. Because they published the report with around 38 recommendations. So the system itself designed, as I said, designed to punish and to legitimate the Israeli crimes. There is no international law in the court. As a lawyer, if I try to use the law, the Child Rights Convention, direct the judge will stop me. Wake up, you are in the military court, not in the Hague. So the system is designed for that. So any changes in the system, it will be considered as a kind of cosmetics to the disgusting system. So there is no way. UNICEF wasted 2 years dialogue until they managed to convince the Israeli army not to arrest the children in the middle of the night, to send them summons. So they agreed to do it in a pilot project for 2 or 3 months. They did it. But they discovered that, yes, arresting the child in the middle of the night is different than send him someone and to come with the family to the military camp. So they will become with some kind of protection. So they don't want this way. So they stopped it. After the 2 months, they stopped it. And now they continue to arrest them. So there is no way to change in the system. The system is, the whole system should be stopped, as my colleague started, by prison is for criminals. Any child under the age of 18 considered victim, even if he commit a crime, he will considered as a victim. There is no way, no child should be behind bars. So I think the only way is to hold them accountable. Accountability is the main concern. I'm happy for the decision a few days ago from the ICC prosecutor And I believe it is a very strong message to the criminals wherever in the occupation, and of course for the others also, because we are working for children in Palestine, but also would like to see all the children enjoy their rights according to the Children's Convention everywhere without any discrimination. Thank you.
One last thing, a question for you. How many of you know that there is a dial system of law that exists in the West Bank? Dial system of law. Like an Israeli child in Hebron will be treated as a civilian Palestinian Israeli child, and that is not prisonable at all, while his neighbor in Hebron, who is actually the owner of the land, is actually a military law that applies to him, not the same law that applies to his. I mean, how comes that this is like can't be existing in 2024? And this is a war crime, actually. This is apartheid, and this is occupation. This is how ugly Israel is, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you, Geth. Thank you, Khaled. Thank you all for being here on a morning, which is also in Norway quite historic. So, and thank you, Save the Children, for hosting us. And I give the final word to Gunvor.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gunvor, head of or director of Advocacy and Communications in Save the Children Norway, and I have the honor to sort of just thank you for a really great and rich discussion on this injustice that is happening to children. So I wanted to also sum up some of your really strong words, but I think the time now has taken us. So I just wanted to give you a present. And this present is it's powerfully associated with Palestine. It's time, and it's found in particular in Palestine, and it represents the resilience of the Palestinian people. So this is for you, Khaled. And yes, and for you, Geir.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for you, Ahmad. And I think for us now, I think the discussion on what can we do together to make things change happen is super important. Not only documenting, but also putting pressure on our governments, not only the Israeli government, but on our governments, saying that as long as you are accepting, you're also being complicit. And also taking other tools, not only nicely talking dialogue, but using other methods and using the accountability system to really make change happen. And as Ahmad said, children are our seeds for change, and we really need to make change happen together. So thank you so much for today.